Welcome back to the podcast. Today we talked about Zac Alsop's recent video and what might have made it so successful. We also talk a bit about the interplay between traditional media and YouTube and which side is winning. And we also talk about a YouTuber's crisis with getting his film made on time. I guess both of you guys already know because we chatted about it, but the video that probably most caught my eye this week was by Zac Alsop. It's called I Challenged a Hacker to Ruin My Life in 28 Days. I saw it on Twitter. I saw he posted something saying, so I got 2 hackers to ruin my life as much as possible in a month. And I made a video about it. And I immediately, I almost never get really hooked by someone just describing the video they made on Twitter. But this time I was like, this is really interesting. I suppose that then made me analyze why did I react so strongly to that? You know, because being YouTube people, we kind of want to elicit that reaction in our audience every time when they see our video title, right? What happens is Zac was hacked a while back and someone stole £43,000 from his business account, his Revolut business account. And so the video opens with a kind of vlog style or a kind of security camera style footage of that happening in real life, of him being like, shit, someone's just hacked my computer, what am I going to do? Then it turns out he got the money back in the end. But then he says, but that made me think, if a hacker can do that much damage in 6 minutes, how much damage can they make in a month? And I've hired these 2 kind of seasoned ex-criminals who now do government consulting. One of them used to hack into security, into sort of government security organizations. So they really know their stuff. And the other guy stole like £30 million worth of goods from various companies in the UK. And he says basically
and he's not in prison.
He's not in prison.
Zac somehow found him. Hey, do you want to make a YouTube video?
These 2 guys have a company, so I think this is partly also.
Oh, are these like the kind of hackers who people hire to stress test their systems, where they'll try and hack in and be like, over the past few weeks, I've just hacked X amount of millions of dollars. This is what you could do. Put these systems in place to make it more secure.
Yeah. And some companies give out bounties on, if you can hack into the iPhone, for example, then show proof, they will give you however many million for doing that. So yeah, it's these kind of guys who have shady pasts, but yeah. So one of the interesting things about it is that he's following a kind of proven strategy. So Max Fosh, who he's collaborated with a few times before, had a video with 11 million views a year ago called I Paid a Private Investigator to Follow Me for a Month. So that was a year ago, so by far the best video on his channel, I think. Then he did another one very shortly after saying I paid 2 private investigators to follow each other, which is a very Max Fosh twist. And yeah, now Zac is basically doing a similar thing with I challenged a hacker to ruin my life. And what I find interesting about it is that I'm sure a lot of work went into it from Zac's team doing the editing, Zac doing vlogs and coming up with the idea. But essentially, it's an interesting way of setting up videos where you don't have to do all the legwork of producing your own content. You pay someone else to do something to you or around you or organize something for you. You are completely in the dark. And the structure of the video is it cuts between these people's vlog, about them doing the shady stuff to you, and then it cuts back to you, giving the reaction. So that got me thinking, essentially, that a lot of YouTube channels could follow a similar procedure. So, for example, I don't know, I hired X person to design my wedding for me, or maybe if you're a productivity YouTuber, you could do something like I gave. I gave some productivity advice to one of my subscribers and saw how much they'd improve in 30 days. Obviously, you need a better title than that. But essentially, if you're a big YouTuber with a big platform and people are already interested in you and think that you create high quality videos, you could kind of, have a think about outsourcing that to someone else.
I used to follow a graphic design YouTuber. And they did something similar where they would go on Fiverr and they would hire like a $5 like logo creator, $50, and then like a $500 designer, and then he would sort of review all of those different logos to kind of like show the different logos at different price points. And that then ends up becoming a series because it's very easy content to make, and it's quite interesting to watch, you know, because it's how often, you know, you as a consumer would never pay, you know, for the same logo from a $5, $50 and a $500 logo designer. But if someone's going to do that for content, sure, you'll watch it, right? And they've done that so many times, and I've seen loads of different spin-offs like that, even with things like editing. And so that's more of like a creative one. But I think like things like hacking absolutely takes it to the next level, especially because it's in real life. Like buying something, kind of reviewing it's like fun, but when it's like they're going to hack and ruin, like I think that's the important thing in Zac's title. It's like, it's going to ruin my life. It's kind of like, okay, he's going to go to like the extreme here, and so you kind of want to click to find out what's going on there. But yeah, I think it's definitely a strong style of content to be able to kind of outsource that, as it were, and then retrospectively kind of give your opinions and being like, oh, I didn't think that was going to happen, but it did, and here's the footage that they've captured of me doing whatever that they've done in that previous month.
I think that's something, it kind of debunks something that I get asked a lot, because I tweet a lot about the need to script write things to as great a degree as possible when it makes sense. And that's the refutation that I get a lot from people who are like, oh, but I repair like old antique cars and I don't know exactly what's going to happen until I get there. And it's like, it just kind of switches the onus from front loading all the prep to having to really just think about the storytelling afterwards, which is actually, in my opinion, is a more fun challenge. So like you say, I feel like this is a good opportunity because you outsource a lot of the kind of bulk of the having to go and film stuff. And it then comes down to more of like really thinking about the storytelling afterwards with the pieces that you get. And I think, I mean, it's hard because I know there's a tendency that you want to try and be like honest with your audience, and you don't want to do anything that's too kind of clickbaity or whatever. But it's like, you do have a little bit of liberty if you've got a load of footage like that from whatever it is, without knowing what's going to come, to like arrange it in a way that makes the 15-20 minute experience really satisfying for your audience, and to like really craft the best story that you can from that, even if you have to like swap the order of little things over. It's like a new challenge that you could take on.
Yeah, I feel like it's probably a lot more work on the editing side. If you haven't scripted it and you just get a bundle of footage, I'm assuming Zac had to cut a lot of interesting things out, and that the editors were pulling their hair out with, oh, are we including this? Are we not including that? I think the work takes place. It's essentially reality TV, right? We stick a bunch of variables in. There is a kind of a mission, but it's not clear how you're going to get there. And I think the kind of smartest reality TV producers are setting things up so that they can guarantee that there will be interesting conflict. So like Love Island, for example.
Yeah, this is a good point.
A new person is introduced every now and then, and people are the kind of, so Love Island is a pretty trashy TV show in the UK, which probably Americans know about as well, where a bunch of young people are stuck together in a villa on an island, and the competition is which couple they have to couple up, and which couple wins the audience's vote by the end, right? But the producers, and there's been a lot of talk about how ethical this is. The producers basically do everything possible to make these people's lives hell and create drama by saying everyone has to swap beds for the night or something like this. Yeah. Or there's a new person introduced every now and then who is usually kind of very attractive, and that they know that's going to stir shit up. So I think if someone is planning a video like this, they need to that where they don't know what's going to happen, they need to think like, how can I guarantee that interesting stuff will happen? In
it's
this
quite
case,
similar
I don't think it was that difficult.
To Big Brother. You know, they used to do that back in the day, and they got in trouble for that a lot of the time. But you touch on a good topic around sort of faking it, essentially, because I think there are a lot of YouTubers who do this type of content that absolutely fake it, and there are some that manufacture it where the reaction is real, but you can tell that it's not quite right. And I say this because when I was growing up, I think depending on your age, the more sort of you can be hoodwinked by it. So when I was a kid, and you think of something like Top Gear, for example, the car show, very big in the UK, but also internationally, they would go on these trips, you know, around the world, and there'd be these situations where the car breaks down, and then these people come along and they have to help them, but they're from like this local village, and they have to like help them get the car started, and then the car falls into a ditch, and so they have to go and hitchhike, and like it gets like more and more extreme. And it used to happen sort of with TV shows like The Gadgets show as well in the UK. And as a kid, I would always watch this and be like, this is amazing, you know, this is such an entertaining thing, like I can't believe these things are happening. But then the older you get, the more you're like, is that actually happening, right? So it's not like Bear Grylls. I used to watch his Born Survivor series on Discovery, and there was like this episode where him and his entire camera crew are walking on abandoned train tracks, and then they walk inside of this extremely long tunnel, and then halfway through, they hear a train, and this train starts coming down the tunnel, and they're running out of it, and they just about get out before it runs them over. And as a kid, you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing entertainment. You know, I want to watch every single episode. But when you look back now, it's like, oh yeah, they were acting, or that was set up. That wasn't quite real. And I do think I have seen many videos. I don't know if I kind of want to go, that person's faking it. But I feel like their audience is susceptible to being tricked in those situations. And it's not completely legit, you know.
It's interesting that you say that, because the first, after Zac has set up the premise, the first kind of scene we get is these two guys putting a bag over his head, bundling him into a van, driving him to a studio, putting him down with like the harsh lights blaring at him. And it's clear, like everyone knows this is faked. When they arrive, they kind of give him this document to sign, like you have to promise that you have to say that we are allowed to do all these illegal things to you, basically. And it's clearly faked and set up, but it still feels exciting. So I think you can get away with some element of fake drama or suspense, but yeah, I guess it's when you're clear, it's when it's not so obvious that it's fake that it becomes, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's problematic, but I think it depends on the topic, right?
Why I like Ryan Trahan's videos. You can tell he doesn't fake any of that. Like, that's him doing things for real. Like, even when it's like his
team in the background now being like,
we've done a good job here, Ryan. Like they can't tell. But like, even I think with like his Penny series, I believe that that's real. Obviously, I don't know. Does he actually survive on a couple of dollars, and he goes and just eats that food, and like he's struggling, he's like, I'm not eating tonight because I didn't have the money? Does that really happen? I don't know, maybe not, but maybe he does, I don't know. But I feel like for the most part, the whole thing of like actually going around drawing things for people and charging $1, that stuff's real. And there are YouTubers out there who've been known in the past for like their prank videos and things like that, where they've just completely faked it, where they've just asked someone to come in, say these specific words, and I'll give you, $10. People will do that. It's really easy. But it's usually teenagers and kids who can't tell that stuff. But I'm obviously much older than a teenager or a kid. But when I watch Ryan's Trahan stuff, I feel like it's pretty legit.
Something I think he does do is not fake it, but I think he does take it in a direction that would be more entertaining for the audience. Because I think at one point he does some sketching of pictures for people, and they give him like $10 each. And someone commented, and his aim was to get to, I can't remember how much. This is for his European trip. And someone commented saying like, bro could have just stood in that square for the rest of the trip and made like X amount just by doing the pictures. But that would not have been entertaining for the audience. So that's not faking it, but that's being smart with, do I really want to do the sensible thing that is going to bore my audience to death? Yeah.
No, I agree, and that's something like I've been thinking the whole way through. It's like one of my basically my main client at the moment is Mike Shake, who basically learns a new, usually physical skill, week in and week out. Sometimes it's like more varied stuff, but I think that's one of the things where it's like I'm the person who receives the footage, and we kind of work together to like construct the story out of it. But it's like he really does. Like one skill we did recently with a video that just came out was the last skill in this video was learning this pool trick shot. And it sincerely took him 5 days of literally repeating the same motion over and over and over again. He really did get he gets kicked out of a pool club because they're like, you're destroying our table, please leave. He then has to buy himself a pool table so he can keep trying it. And I remember like watching it, partly thinking, Jesus, this is a lot of footage to go through. But then there was this greater sense of like, I'm really pleased that I am working with somebody, and that like, you know, because he's got quite a young audience generally. And it's like, we're not trying to hoodwink these kids. But at the same time, it's like, we don't want to, if the ratio of like time taken to do each skill was true to life, it would be like 5 minutes of the first 4 skills and then half an hour of him trying the same pool shot. And so like naturally then there's common sense comes in, and you cut some stuff down. But I think like you said earlier, as long as it's self-evident that you are either like in Zac's case, you are doing something that is dramatic and obviously faked to get people into the video, or taking artistic license to make the viewing experience more pleasant, but while the actual meat of the video and like the underlying kind of theme is sincere, then obviously that's chill. But one thing I was actually going to say, like taking this like far the other way, was I don't know if you guys remember, there was a YouTuber who faked a plane crash a couple of years ago. Or maybe even no,
I don't think well, it depends by faked. He definitely crashed the plane.
He did not fake it.
So I guess it's like it's sort of meta in that it was supposed to be like oh no, the plane's crashing, but it turned out that he was just doing it for real, and I guess he's now in jail. He definitely pleaded guilty.
Yeah, I think he went to jail. He pretended that the plane was like going to crash and that something had gone wrong when it hadn't. He just flew it over a mountain and decided to bail, and just recorded it for content, and then walked up and got the camera footage of like the camera that was attached to the plane. And he filmed the whole thing, and it was like, well, obviously we're going to see that it wasn't real, you know? So yeah, a bit of an idiot there, but I think he's in jail. Yeah.
This reminds me of, there was some video that went viral of I think a woman just throwing chairs off a balcony in central London a while back, and there was no kind of thought about what onto. I think it might have been onto a main road. I genuinely can't remember, but it was very kind of Grand Theft Auto style. Like, it doesn't matter, they're just NPCs, right? Yeah.
It was in Toronto, I believe, in 2019, and I'm going to reveal now the Google question, what happened to the girl who threw the chair over the balcony?
Please reveal to us.
The 20-year-old was sentenced to 2 years on probation, 150 hours of community service, and fined 2,000 Canadian dollars.
Oh, so
I don't know how much that is, but yeah, that sounds about right.
Sounds about right. What's the moral that we take from all of this? Don't fake it. Really do throw chairs at people if that's what you're saying you've done.
Yeah, I don't know what the moral here is. Make things entertaining, but not like don't get put into jail.
Yes.
I'm going to elegantly segue back to Zac Alsop here, to say that I think part of the thing that makes his content, a lot of his content actually, is I snuck into Glastonbury, or I pickpocketed a pickpocket, right? Got 7 million views published 6 months ago, right? A lot of it is interesting, like you said, Jamie, as well, because it is illegal, and I suppose people want to see things that they have never seen before. One way of doing that is to actually do illegal stuff and put it on YouTube, and the other one is to find a way around it by, I don't know, either interviewing ex-criminals or getting someone to do something that is shady but is actually legal, or goes in that direction, so that the I pickpocketed a pickpocket, Zac left a fake phone, or a real phone rather, on a table next to him in London, waited until someone stole it, and then followed the guy and stole the phone back from him, as I remember rightly. So yeah, this concludes this chapter. So in summary, I think if you're an established YouTuber, or maybe even if you're a new one, think about how you can maybe bring new characters in and put the onus of creating the content on them for a few videos. Have you be more of a passive character who's reacting to what they're doing. A bit like, I mean, I think a lot of established TV already does this. So like Ramit Sethi's TV show, I Will Show You How to Be Rich, basically has him tell people to vlog their couples to vlog their lives, talk about their money, and he just needs to come in and say, what the hell are you doing? Why did you buy that house? Why do you have a savings account for your dog and not for yourself? And it's just very easy for him to react to things that other people have done. So yeah, I think that's one route you can take.
Yeah, even in that, like some of the most like dramatic moments I seem to remember came from like, you'd see the kind of behind the scenes of like, he'd come in, set up that, okay, you guys need to just talk about money this evening. You need to talk about this specific thing. Please do so. And I will see you tomorrow. And then it cuts to them in the evening and it starts well. And then they start arguing. And then it just becomes like a drama entirely based around this family that you don't know, but now they've become like the main feature. And then the next day he'll just get a phone call and sort of you don't hear what's being said, but you'll just like see him react, be like, oh no, oh, it went that badly. Oh, okay, yeah. Right. I got to go back. And then the cycle kind of repeats.
And there's this kind of built-in tension of what is Ramit going to say about this? And with the Zac Alsop video, it's like, what is Zac going to have to say about this? This character I'm already invested in. So that works nicely.
Yeah, I think it's the difference between traditional media and YouTube. Because a lot of TV shows have always sort of been like that, you know, with things like Super Nanny, you know, where she comes in and then the house, you sort of these crazy kids are sort of introduced to us and how they're so disruptive. And then we watch the parents mess up. And then in comes Super Nanny who solves it. Even Gordon Ramsay with Kitchen Nightmares, you know, visiting a kitchen, establishing that their kitchen's awful. And then he comes in and saves the day. And I think that sort of thing is kind of coming over to YouTube now. And so with Max Fosh and Zac Alsop, how they're sort of doing that, it's very much like the ITV shows of, you know, I forget what's the name of the show where they basically will have like one person who will go on the run and they've got to get across the UK and these sort of special forces will use CCTV and all these tracking things to kind of like hunt them down.
I think it's called Hunted.
Okay, so yeah, like that in itself is what they're doing essentially. And there are many YouTube videos like that where it's like going on the run but hired a private investigator to come after us to find out where we are. I think Mr. Beast has done that with like the FBI tracking him videos. I think a lot of it now is that it's like the YouTubeified version of traditional media, even down to things like cooking channels where it's less entertainment, more education, where before we would watch these these TV shows where we'd see Jamie Oliver or Gordon Ramsay or whoever showing us these recipes, whereas now YouTube's kind of replaced that, but we've YouTubeified it by making there be meme noises and like funny inside jokes. And it, instead of it being like a 30, 40, 50 minute program, now it's just 10 to 15 minutes. And I think there's something to be said there around, is YouTube lacking originality, or is it just kind of rehashing what's already worked before? Because, you know, everything is a remix to a certain degree, but it's kind of just changing that format slightly for the short-term world of the internet.
What I like about YouTube is that there are always these tiny little channels bubbling away in the background that could pop off at any moment. And whereas with TV, you would ITV1, ITV2, something else. No, none of this is tickling my fancy. And you'd have to have some amount of credibility to actually appear on TV and have a cooking show. And there are already big stakes. But with YouTube, people can do more experimental stuff and just blow up really quickly, really kind of fairly easily.
And one thing that I thought was quite interesting, that I don't know if you guys saw, just in relation to Max Fosh again, he tweeted about a video he made where he went to play the triangle in a I don't know, like the London Philharmonic Orchestra or something like that, a really big, well-established orchestra. And coincidentally, while he was prepping for that video, he found out that Romesh Ranganathan and Rob Beckett, British comedians, were basically doing the same thing. Again, not that they'd copied, it just so happened that these two, that was being done at the same time for a terrestrial British TV channel. And the difference in efficiency from ideation to execution of those two different videos essentially were that Max managed to pull his off in, like a couple of weeks to a month or so. It was him, his editor, and like his producer or whatever, very, very few people. And it got seen millions of times. And then compare and contrast that to traditional media, the amount of time it takes to, book, I guess, all the kind of necessary parts to make that come together for a TV channel. It was like a 6-month operation, and it got half as many views as Max's video. And so kind of beyond the discussion of like, oh, is it rehashing, or is it like a YouTubified version? It's like one way, or regardless, it's certainly a more efficient way of doing what already exists, with the possibility to then be more experimental more quickly, because there's a much quicker feedback loop from ideation to execution.
Yeah, agreed. And I feel like with the equipment these days, kind of consumer grade camera and audio is very, very good, way better than it was 20 years ago or whatever. And so now people don't care that much because it won't feel like a home movie. It'll just feel like a little bit rough around the edges. And yeah, what's even more interesting about that is if you asked a random person in the UK, do you know who Max Fosh is versus do you know who Romesh Ranganathan is? I'm assuming most people would say, oh yeah, I know who Romesh is, but I don't really know this Max Fosh guy.
I guess it would be depend on the demographic, but yes, largely yes, I would say, yeah. So what was your kind of point from that though?
Okay, so my point from that is that you can get a lot more views in total, even if you have less star power, as long as you package it well and are smart about it. Even with way less star power and less kind of production capacity, you can outdo the competition.
So one thing that I noticed this week on YouTube that is kind of related to what we've been talking about is this creator I've been watching for probably about 7 or 8 years, maybe more. He's a film critic on YouTube and started out just making film reviews in his bedroom. In fact, he was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and so was had to kind of watch films in secret, basically at first. Like I think he's talked very openly about this now, but I think when he first his pastor or whatever they're called in that particular faith heard that he'd gone to see Thor and had to bring him in for like a private discussion about how this was like not acceptable and whatever. So he comes from like a very a background in which you would never expect him to have been able to achieve what he has, where he kind of broke away from that, became a film reviewer on YouTube, and it's been his dream for ages to make a proper feature film of his own. And about 2 years ago, he did a Kickstarter for a horror film that he had written called Shelby Oaks. And at the time, I think the goal was like $250,000. It smashed that easily, got to like 500K. And at the time of recording, at least, it's currently raised $1.3 million. I think it was the biggest Kickstarter campaign of all time for a film. And I think,
What's the name of this guy?
So he's called Chris Stuckman. And he's basically got to this point where his channel has pivoted away. Like it used to be 3 or 4 movie reviews per week. And he's very openly been like, hey, this is no longer like, I like reviewing movies. I obviously love movies still, but this is my kind of thing. But the thing that was interesting and that happened this week is that he, because of the writers' strikes that are currently going on, or the general, there's 2 strikes, aren't there, in Hollywood at the moment, he is like 99% done with this film. And there are basically a few lines that he needs to get the actors back in to ADR. And because of the strikes, he is unable to do so.
ADR being?
I don't even know what it stands for, but dub the lines.
Yeah, I think it's got audible dialogue recording or something like that. It's where if if an actor recorded their lines, but there was some wind, for example, and the audio wasn't clean, you would then go into a studio and basically lip sync to what you're saying, and then they match that up and it looks perfectly. Mr. Beast does it all the time now. I've noticed.
I can notice it too.
Yeah, it's like his voice just sounds too perfect in a studio, and it matches up perfectly with him, you know, inside of a car. That you'd never get clean audio like that.
And it also famously happened in, I think it was GoldenEye, where like the main Goldfinger, where the actor they hired to play Goldfinger, his first language wasn't English. And it was only when they like filmed it, they realized that they basically couldn't understand him. And so for the entire film, they had to get someone else in to lip sync every single line that he did. But yeah, so that's where they're at basically, is they've got a couple, like a few lines that need doing. But it's now delaying the film indefinitely. And I think the thing that I found interesting about all this is like the fact that despite the fact he's been sat on more or less $1.5 million of his audience's money for 2 years and counting, and with no definite end in sight, I just found it really interesting that the strength of the kind of audience that he'd built up over that time, people are completely willing to give him as much time as he needs. There doesn't seem to be any kind of disgruntlement from his audience, despite the fact it's like all this money that they've paid. They've been waiting for the film. They were promised it a fair while ago. And again, this to me is just like, it's an interesting transition. It's kind of like the inverse of what we discussed, I guess, where he's kind of going, rather than taking from traditional media and bringing it to YouTube, he's like a YouTuber who is ascending to, if ascending is even the right way to say it, depending on your opinion, to a more traditional style of media, but using this audience that he cultivated over however many years to fund it. And I just found that the strength of enthusiasm for this and the willingness to give so much money towards it just speaks volumes of the kinds of relationships that you can build with your audience over enough time, even though he now basically doesn't make YouTube videos anymore. That's a slight exaggeration. He still does.
I was like, I'm looking at his channel now and he's uploaded 2 videos in the past 24 hours.
Oh, like, Jesus.
You sure?
Okay. On the whole, I guess compared to like how much he used to upload, he does a lot more like behind the scenes stuff now, like basically he wants to show people what it looks like for a normal person with basically no hope at the start of making a film, what it kind of looks like to build that credibility and make a film. You're right, Jamie. He does still upload film reviews, I guess more regularly than I realized. But it's been like a real switch, and his videos definitely get fewer views than they used to before. But it seems like that goodwill, that sort of residual goodwill, is still very much existent from, you know, the 10 years of work he put into it before.
Why do you think there is that much goodwill? Like specifically, is it that people who invested have certain characteristics? Is it that they're maybe people who aspire to make films themselves and therefore understand it's a difficult process? What's the kind of...
It's probably kind of a mixture of things, but I think definitely the honesty that he came out with, it was a couple of years ago when he first talked about, because he had this channel ages and ages ago and he had to give it up. He put this video out maybe 10 years ago where he was like, sorry, for reasons I can't explain, I have to stop doing this because, you know, like it was his whole life was at risk of crumbling if he continued to go ahead with this, you know, like being disowned by his family and that kind of thing. And so I think that there's something of like a kind of redemption arc to him as a person. And maybe this is like, like a broader point where YouTube is really good for getting people who you have no idea who they are to potentially blow up. And you can see people who you've never heard of before doing really interesting ideas, more interesting than TV, out of absolutely nowhere. And you're interested in the idea, but then it's like to sustain that long term and to build a business from it. And, you know, all the kind of longevity that you want to associate with that channel. It's like allowing, I guess, a bit of who you are into it, and the power that might have down the line in terms of what your audience is willing to do for you if you're willing to put yourself out there in that way. So I thought it was pretty cool.
I think someone could make a really interesting mini documentary video about YouTubers who have struggled with their family's opinion of them being YouTubers. I think the guy from Yes Theory, I think his family were really against it. If I remember, I don't want to misstate any situations, but as I remember it, one of the guys from Yes Theory, his family were really not keen on him being a YouTuber. I think Johnny Harris has spoken about leaving the Mormon Church, and he's also made a video about the Mormon Church, sort of describing the history of it, which I assume most of his family would not be that keen on, and this guy as well. It's a kind of interesting dynamic where people are very publicly talking about things that their family are not happy with.
Maybe it just speaks to that kind of underlying thing that maybe all people of our generation, at least, and I think this is definitely changing rapidly, but like there's still this kind of hangover feeling that if it's not true, like if you had a job in TV, I feel like everyone in your family would immediately be like fab, even though it's like now TV is a slightly ailing medium that gets fewer views than people on YouTube, and is going downhill as opposed to something like YouTube, which is still going up. So yeah, it's interesting to see if that sort of redemption arc would be a thing that would exist in 5-10 years time when this is the pervasive online medium. We'll see.
Yeah, I saw Dodford, who does these kind of amazing documentaries on YouTube about various famous people. He was talking on Twitter about how if you'd asked him a few years back, would he switch to traditional media from YouTube, he would have said, yeah, absolutely. He would have bitten your hand off. That was the kind of the dream trajectory, right? Away from YouTube up to traditional. but he says now that's probably not the case, and that he likes how YouTube shapes his art. I've also heard Mr. Beast saying if anyone joins his team being like, yeah, I'd love to work in this YouTube stuff for a while before going into making like real TV and film, he's like, no, get them out of here. So yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic between these two worlds. All right, thank you for watching. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, and you can also subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you enjoy listening to your podcasts.